Hi, John. It's Thursday, and we just saw The Fault in Our Stars, the new adaptation of John Green's novel. And the way this show works is we give a quick review of the movie without spoilers so that you can decide if you want to see it or not. So we'll tell you whether we liked it or whether it forgot to be awesome. And then after that, you can either go see the movie or just listen to the rest of our review if you've already seen it or don't think you want to see it, because we'll get into more detail and talk potentially about plot spoilers. And in this particular movie, this particular story, there are quite a few spoilers. So stay away from it if you're going to go see the movie beyond that point. But with the non-spoiler version, I will say that I enjoyed this movie. I liked the book. I think the movie is a very, very, very close adaptation of the book. I think the only negative aspect of that, I would say, is that in terms of storytelling from a movie perspective, they pull in so much content from the book that the movie will run longer than you expect it to, especially if you haven't read the book and you don't know what's left to talk about. You'll feel like, you know, you've gotten to the third act a couple of times and you haven't yet. So it does kind of ramble, but I think for people that are fans of the book and want to see that brought to life, I think it does that extremely well. So I would say fans of the book definitely see it. If you have no intention of reading the book, it probably will... You might find it a bit boring or a bit slow, but overall it's still a good movie. What'd you guys think?
I enjoyed it. I think a lot of what I enjoyed about it, though, and I'll be interested to hear what you guys think, was that it sort of made me a little bit nostalgic to be a teenage girl.
Me too.
Well, but it was sort of that, like, they were so young and innocent and kind of reliving that feeling again. So yeah, I enjoyed it too. But I liked the book better.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I loved the movie. Huge fan of it. I loved the book as well. And I was kind of being an ass when I was saying that I too was nostalgic for being a teenage girl, but it did make me nostalgic for being a teenager and finding that first love and really like falling for somebody and feeling that for the first time and feeling like everything's poetic and more important than it could possibly be. And they put it in the stakes of cancer, so this really might be the only love they ever have, and they're being serious whenever they say things like that. It was a great character tale. I was into it. I'd say if you're a fan of the book, you're going to love this movie. If you will never read this book, it might be a little slow-paced, but the characters are worth the film.
Yeah.
That's my feeling on it.
I liked it for what it was. It's not the type of movie I would normally go see. I haven't read the book. I think I agree with both of these guys when they say that if you're somebody who wouldn't necessarily read the book, it might run a little long, seem a little slow at times. That's pretty much the category I'm in, but I do think it had some great performances. I thought that the writing, which I assume was in large part taken directly from the dialogue in the book, was really, really strong. So they made some great choices with it throughout. But it's probably not something that I'm going to run out and see again real soon. And definitely, if you are going to see it on opening weekend, be prepared for the throngs of teenage girls in the theater, clapping at key moments, sighing at other key moments, and crying at other key moments, and expecting you to join in with them.
Yeah, and that actually wasn't quite as... I bet that actually gets worse as time goes by. Like, as people get used to the movie, that it gets... People come and sort of, over exaggerate their reactions to it.
It was a fan experience that while I was somewhat expecting it, being a fanboy of Marvel, of course, and comic book movies, we all know what it's like to sit in that fanboy room of people freaking out when they see Wolverine or freaking out when they saw Nick Fury. But for this, it was kind of amazing to see the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
And to hear people clapping and freaking out whenever these very important characters in the story came on the screen, but you'd just be like, wow, man, you just clapped because of the heart of Jesus guy. Like you guys just flipped out because there was a lot of moments that I love in the book, and people flipped whenever they happened in the movie. That was really intriguing to me.
So it's a really well done adaptation. It really is. There are certainly things that happen in the movie that are slightly different than the way I picture them in the book, but only slightly. So I really think that fans of it will like it. And I think if you're someone who's not really into the whole reading thing, I actually listened to it as an audiobook. But if you're thinking, hey, I'll skip the book and just catch the movie and find out what the fuss is about, I think you'll get the general drift from it. I do. I just think that you'll find that it's a bit longish compared to other movies other movie structures, and because of all the reasons we just talked about. So that's the quick spoiler-free version. If you want to go see the movie, please don't let us ruin it for you. Go see it. Stop the video now before we get into spoilers, which is happening right now. So the thing about the length and the thing about the pacing of the film, which I know I'm certain that people, I personally felt that the movie was slow, in the back half especially. Everything that happened after they got to Amsterdam was sort of a drag, and not in a emotional way, but in a let's just get on with this kind of way.
Hurry up and die already.
Pretty much. That really is kind of, it's unfortunate, but they felt the need to bring the eulogy scene into it, which I would have edited out if I were directing the film.
Really?
I wouldn't have needed that one necessarily. Or there's ways that this could have been. We didn't need every scene.
I agree with that.
We didn't need every beat from the book.
Yeah.
But having said that, there's also people that would disagree with that and say, we need all of these different pieces for it to work. The main twist of the story and of the movie is that it isn't Hazel that actually dies at the end. It is Augustus that dies. And if you tell that story in a typical movie structure, that ends up being very telegraphed, and that ends up being a very cliche story. Whereas when they tell it the way that they do, it almost becomes like a 5-act movie where there's the first 3 acts of her story, or the 3 acts of structure of her story, and then you've got 2 additional acts of the end of his story. So from a storytelling perspective, you just feel like, oh, there's more, and there's more. But I felt like all of the performances, the key performances, were good. I kind of wanted a little bit more emotion from Laura Dern. Quite honestly, I felt like if I was I didn't cry at this movie, and I kind of expected to. And she was kind of where I think it fell flat for me. Just that she wasn't really overly emotional. She was just sort of this sort of even keel of concern all throughout the movie.
Honestly, I saw more emotion from her when she was caring for the sick Triceratops than I did when I saw her caring for her daughter in this movie. I felt like I'm not saying that as a huge thing against her character, because I don't think she played it bad. I just think she played it so internalized.
Yeah.
And she kept thinking it more and more internalized, thinking, what would my pain be like? What would my pain be like? Put on a strong face for Hazel. Put on a strong face for Hazel. And I understand why she played it that way, and I respect that.
Yeah.
But there is a part of my human brain that looks for emotion whenever when an actor is acting.
Yeah.
Well,
and she didn't really let us in.
And the other thing about that is that a key part of the story for Hazel is that she's really worried about how her parents, particularly her mom, are going to go on after she goes. And I mean, I think that would be natural in her situation, but I also think that from a story perspective, if we don't see why she feels that way from the mother, then it's just Hazel feeling that way for the sake of Hazel feeling that way, not Hazel feeling that way because we actually have evidence that that might be the case.
That she is breaking down.
Well, and I think it kind of makes, I mean, I think they played up the romantic relationship because that's what sells. But I think a big part of what got me from the book is that it was about all of those relationships. That it was about her relationships with her parents those things that she was worried about leaving behind. And part of the grenade thing was that, like, where all of that fallout was going to be, not just Augustus.
I still felt that way in the movie, but you're right. They definitely did give more of a feeling towards the relationship of Augustus and Hazel than they did Hazel and her mom or father.
And Shailene Woodley was the emotional core of the movie.
Yes.
I mean,
definitely.
she was. How she was relating to the scene is how we as the audience, and rightly so, because she is the audience's surrogate to the story. I mentioned the thing about Laura Dern because it was kind of surprising to me. I expected her to be a little bit more than just the one scene that they kind of show the flashback of her saying, "I won't be a mother anymore," which is, it is her most, like, emotional breakdown in the book. Also, the father in the book is supposedly, like, the basket case that's always, like, crying and...
wow, he wasn't at all.
No, no.
They didn't go for that. And I kind of thought they would sort of merge that trait into Laura Dern, because I thought trying to add a dimension to him would be too much for the movie. But yeah, I mean, talking really long about one character, Willem Dafoe is a really fun cameo as Van Houten.
Have you ever heard Swedish hip hop?
Yes.
That moment ended me. I mean, like, obviously we're on an emotional roller coaster the entire time, so they're bringing us up and down. And by the way, they do that wonderfully in this movie. They give you these great emotional beats of you laughing almost uncontrollably at certain things because they brought you so deep into caring for the character that when they throw away lines just flippantly, you're laughing as if your friend is saying them.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing for a movie to bring you in character-wise. So I loved that. But when Van Houten was like, "Have you ever listened to Swedish hip-hop?" It just destroyed me. I was laughing so hard at that.
There was some song that they played that we all laughed at, but nobody else in the theater laughed. What song did they play?
I'm not sure.
It was something... It was like an 80s song.
Oh,
I can't think what it was.
Are you talking about the trailer that had the Bismarcky song?
Yes, that's what it was.
Right.
We all
It was
laughed.
not in The Fault in Our Stars.
Where was it?
That was
Oh,
in
it was
the trailer beforehand.
Oh.
However, that was really funny.
That was a cool trailer.
But we aged ourselves because the
The
teenagers
rest of the room.
and the...
I didn't care.
Sorry, anyway.
There were a lot of the humor. It was kind of interesting to me because I haven't read the book, and all three of you have, I think you said. But a lot of the humor I could see, okay, that would be funny if I just read that on a page. But a lot of it, though, was stuff that probably wouldn't be nearly as funny unless you actually had it, like when he plays the Swedish hip hop. Some other things, it just wouldn't come across quite as well on the written page. So I think, again, probably not fair for me to say since I haven't read the book, but I think in some ways the movie has a little bit of a leg up on the book in that regard, because when you want to get those emotional roller coasters and get those laughs in there, because you're going to need the laughs later when you're, feeling horrible about everything that's going on, then the movie can really do that in ways that the book cannot.
Well, and the other thing that the movie does that the movie can do more successfully, I think, than the book is that reading the book, a lot of times it's hard not to hear John Green's voice when you read.
I actually agree with that. Yeah, especially when you watch Vlogbrothers. Every other day of the week, and then you're listening to the guy, watching him on Tumblr when he posts things. Or
his
the
turn of
Wimbly Wombly
phrase
videos.
is very specific. His cadence and his delivery and the way he says things. There's a particular John Greenish sort of style.
And it doesn't help that he directly writes Augustus in his own voice.
Right.
Like, in his writing, he's writing Augustus as if he is that character talking. You can see that in his vocabulary and the way
And there were definitely direct quotes from the book. And things that came straight from
there were tons of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Just as an adaptation, it's got to be one of the closest I've seen to just completely following the source material, and not doing it to the point where it's not a movie, it's a a pageant of a book,
Right.
but doing it really, really. Son of God was a pageant of a book, that
Yeah.
as an example.
Right.
So seeing something that's John Green's words coming out of actors that are delivering his lines, and they have the same weight to them, or they have the same humor to them, but they don't sound like him.
Right.
They're not aping John Green on stage. They're not doing an impression of him.
The teen voice in this, to say that, already I sound old. The teen voice in this.
Kids these days.
Kids these days. The teen voice in this, I thought was so important, because it wasn't dumbed down. There was no bullshit behind it. There was never a moment where you were like, kids don't talk like that, or people don't talk like that, know? A perfect example, when Hazel gets raging pissed at Van Houten and just turns around and goes, fuck off. When she does that, that is so not taming down reality.
Yeah.
And I felt like a lot of this movie, and why it was so long, to get back to that, was because it refused to tame down reality. As John Green has said so often, it refused to look at complexity. It's like, no, it is long. He didn't die right away. He didn't tell her he was sick and then all of a sudden have a real quick passing into the ether.
Right.
No, he fucking suffered, and his body turned to cancer, and he did not have an easy ending. And I thought the movie kind of gave that to us. They were like, this isn't going to be easy.
Right.
This last half hour isn't enjoyable. It's you sitting through this person dying, and you need to feel like Hazel. You need to be in love with this character, which they do very well.
Yeah.
And you need to feel like you're sitting there and watching him die. I think that is as disturbing as that sounds, it's what makes this movie different from lip service films that so often go out there, the sentimental bullshit of he died and all the healthy people learned a good lesson about it.
Well, and I think
next week on Hallmark Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Right.
They did a good job of, I talk about how long the movie seems, and it feels long not because of the running time of the movie, but because of how much story there is.
Yeah.
That they've compressed this novel. It is a young adult novel, and it's not a long read, but it is. The audiobook version's 8 hours, 8.5 hours long, and they condensed it down to a 2-hour movie. And they made a lot of really smart choices that, there were lots of scenes where in the book it would have been 2 separate scenes, but in the movie they would do things where she's walking through the Anne Frank house and they're playing voiceovers from Anne Frank, and that's sort of 2 different time frames going on at the same time. Or they have sort of these montage sort of moments where, she's remembering doing things with him that we didn't see before, but they're sort of dealing with the here and now, and also dealing with here's a couple of loose ends and some threads we didn't tie up. That
I absolutely loved the Anne Frank house montage work.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I liked it so much is because the way that they would use the Anne Frank voice clips to kind of narrate what was happening to Hazel, which was so well put together. It's like, and I always thought I was too young to be dealing with this. As she's like, working her way up the fucking...
Another set of
It's
stairs.
funny because as soon as they went to the Anne Frank house, I was like, oh, well, this is going to feel like a forced cliche. And then they started doing that, and I was like, okay, I'm sorry, it's perfect.
it actually
it's
works
working.
really fucking well.
Yeah, and in the book, it's sort of a thing that, the people clapping after they kiss and all of that they're making this big deal about how this is the kind of thing Anne Frank would have wanted. She would have wanted, for young people to be happy in her stead.
Yeah.
And something else that I thought was interesting when I was reading the book. because of what happened in Van Houten's book, I had this like half suspicion that that The Fault in Our Stars would actually end in a half sentence, just to be a jerk, but it didn't. And watching the movie, I actually picked up on something which I guess I kind of figured this out reading the book, but it sunk in a little bit more for me here. The biggest moment for me in the book, the thing that I thought was the most important, was when the mother reveals that she's training to become like a counselor, like a grief counselor or a family counselor for people that are going through what her family's gone through. And that really resonated for me when I read the book as being really important and really something that you don't see a lot of books like really think about or really deal with in a realistic way or any of that kind of thing. Watching it in the movie form, it kind of made me realize that it's John Green's answer to what happens to the characters in the book after the book ends. Like,
Yeah.
he's answering what Hazel's mom's going to do after Hazel dies.
Yeah, he does kind of give you a hint. So many people have asked him that question now, which I find funny because his answer is always that the author has no stake in what happens to the characters afterwards. Yeah. That's up to your imagination. He can't. Once he ended that book, the book's over. Yeah. And he's not writing a sequel, so he's not thinking about the characters and what they're doing anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of what Van Houten is saying, too. But Van Houten, I keep saying Van Houten. Yeah. Van Houten is saying too, except Van Houten says it in a real dicky way.
It's true.
Yeah.
So we really enjoyed it. That's our review of The Fault in Our Stars. We hope you enjoyed that. Check out our other reviews of all the other movies on YouTube and over at DaleMaxfield.com. Thanks for watching.
Okay.
Okay.